This video is entitled Usability and Design Principles and goes with topic 9 of our Systems Analysis and Design course. I'm Jim Renault, PhD from Shawnee State University, and I'll be taking you through this video presentation. This kind of is a companion piece that goes along with Chapter 9 of the book Systems Analysis and Design by Dennis Wixom Roth, which was published by Wiley. When we design a user interface, abbreviated UI by most of us in the industry, or when we model human-computer interaction, which is a much more general term that covers all of the ways that we deal with computers, from ergonomics to systems design to hardware and all of those things, is often abbreviated as HCI. We really need to focus on a term we like to call usability. And usability, it basically means that it's usable. It's the measure of how usable it is. Is it easy to use, and is it easy to learn, are the things that we're going to really focus on when we're trying to create a user interface. HCI and UI design is both an art and a science. There are going to be developers and team members that you have that are just great at laying out a screen, laying out a system, laying out a menu, creating a beautiful, aesthetically correct design, aesthetically nice design. And you're going to have some developers that really don't do a very good job at it. And that's par for the course. That's why we have a team. The thing about UI and HCI design is most of the time it's a problem about space. There's never enough space. Think about the desk at home with all of the crap piled on it. There's never enough space for everything. Your books, your notebooks, your computer, your tablet, your smartphone, your chargers, your cameras, and there's never enough space for anything. And the computer screen is no different at all. And remember, we're also now dealing with the space of a computer screen on a desktop. We're dealing with the space of a phone, which is tiny. We're dealing with all kinds of devices. We're also dealing with the human ability, also known as acuity, to see. Because, yeah, we can do it. The font will shrink down to 5, and yes, it could be seen by somebody with better than 20/20 vision. But most of your users have corrected vision to close to normal, but not all of them. So we've got to worry about acuity, we've got to worry about resolution, we've got to worry about custom devices and specialty devices. And it's a huge problem of space. We've got to be aware of the layout, how things are laid. We've got to be able to, the users have to have a content awareness. So they should be able to look at the screen and see where they are or where things belong. A user needs to see a screen that is aesthetically pleasing. And when I mean aesthetically pleasing, your computer systems don't have to look like a piece of art. In fact, if they do, you've probably gone way beyond. But they need to look clean, nice, simple. The colors need to be pleasing, and we'll talk about those. We also need to be aware of the usage level of who's using the system. Talk about that. One of the biggies is that whatever we do, it has to be consistent throughout the system. And then we need to focus on minimizing the user's effort, reducing the number of clicks, making it as easy as possible to do their job. So these are the 6 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these are the 6 things that I'm going to talk about on the upcoming slides. So laying out a computer screen or laying out a report, think about it on most systems, on most screens that it's kind of divided up into 3 areas. The top area where there's the navigation, or on a report, that's where there are titles and column headings and that type of stuff. Um, the navigation information. The middle of the screen or the middle of the printed report or whatever usually has the content. And then down at the bottom, there's potentially status information, copyright information, and special things down at the bottom that are not used very often, but are needed there on the report or on the screen. So on most systems, you can break your screens up into three parts. The order of things matter, though. You know, remember that in different cultures, we talk about cultural sensitivity in previous presentations. We need to be culturally sensitive in our screen layouts because those of us in Western languages write left to right. But in other languages and in other systems, they read and write right to left. Um, Numbers, for instance, are they justified to the right so they line up or not? So we've got to be very different, thoughtful of cultures and our layout. And our layout should flow in the natural order of the business process. Just stop and think last time you talked to a customer service rep on the phone and they asked for your address. Well, in America, in the United States, we say our street address, our city, our state, and our zip code in that order. That's how we think about an address. And if your system laid out an address and laid out the fields for an address in an order different than that, that would be really confusing for everyone, wouldn't it? Yes, it would. So order matters. And we've got to make sure that our layout makes sense and follows the kind of business process. The next thing a good user interface fosters and helps to create is something we call content awareness. The user needs to be aware of where they are. Where are you on the screen? Where is the cursor? Oh, that little blinky thing. Okay, well, that's content awareness now. We need highlights. We need breadcrumbs maybe up at the top telling them where they are. We need a title bar along the top of the window that's meaningful so that a user can look at the window and go, oh, that's what that window is. Or if it's minimized, they would see a title that's meaningful so they know to click on the right one. We need labels next to fields. You know, there's a field, there should be a label beside it with what we want in that field. Tooltips that highlight or help buttons beside the fields to explain especially difficult fields. Marking of required fields. How many times have you been on a website and you see this little red star beside a field telling you that it's a required field? Well, that's content awareness, reminding you and letting you know where you are. Having headers on columns, headers on tables, using tables and borders and captions and boxes around things with captions so that they know that those items are grouped together. Again, create this idea of content awareness. It lets the user know what it is, why it's there, and why they're there. Aesthetics. Now, I know for a fact that this slide is not very aesthetically pleasing. It's a jumbled mess, but we're talking about aesthetics. Do as I say, not as I do. Well, do as I, yeah, okay, you get it. So aesthetics are the study and making sure things are pleasing to the eye. Pleasing to the eye. It doesn't need to be a work of art. It needs to be usable, comfortable, not too dense or busy. It needs to be simple, direct. Stop and think about some buildings you know that are just pleasing. They're simple, they're direct. Think of a meal. You know, there are some meals that you eat that aren't the most amazing food, but they're just pleasing. They're pleasing to the eye, they're pleasing to the mouth, they're pleasing to the soul. And that's what we're looking for. Now, I'm talking about a computer system. You're going, pleasing to the soul? Really? He's crazy. Yeah, probably. But we need to use colors and fonts and white space. White space is that space like what's around me. The white space that I'm, because the words aren't under me where you can't read them. So white space is important, and we need to use colors and fonts and white space thoughtfully. We just don't throw them down and go, there we go. We need to be very thoughtful about them. Fonts, for instance, there are three kind of general families of fonts: the serif font, the sans serif font, and the monospace font. The serif font are the fonts with little curly cues on the end, and those are pretty good for text. If we were printing out paragraphs of words, then displaying it in a serif font makes sense. It can be a little smaller and the human eye can pick it out. That's why most books and textbooks and newspapers and other periodicals are set in a serif font. A sans serif font is the font you will find on most of your computer screens and most of the websites, and it's a very crisp font, a font without all the curlicues and without all of those things. And most people see that's the font they like on their screen because they can see it. It's like I say, it's good for the screen. And lastly, there's a font family, a group of fonts called monospace fonts. And a monospace font is that every letter is exactly the same width, whether it's a W or the letter I. Now, with serif and sans serif fonts, everything is proportionally spaced, just as wide as it needs to be. But a monospace font is really great for tabular information or reporting information or numbers and stuff like that, or part numbers that contain numbers and letters together, or codes that contain letters and numbers together, because everything is equally spaced apart and you can really see the rows and the patterns a lot easier than using a serif or sans serif font for those things. So be very careful to use the right font. Very careful. Another thing, dealing with colors. Be sure that your colors have enough contrast between them. How many times have we gone to an amateur's website and they used kind of a light, of a gray and a white, and it was kind of hard to see the font on a gray on white or a white on gray, or they used a gray and black and it was kind of hard, or they used two colors that just ugh, I mean, just made your skin crawl. Now, if that's what they were trying to do, I guess that was what they were trying to do, but most of the time that's not what they were trying to do. Be sure that you have enough brightness level or hue difference or contrast between two fonts or two colors on your screen. One other thing to remember is that nearly 10% of men in the world and 1% of women in the world. So if you're in a room of 20 people, probably two or even up to three of you in that room have some sort of color acuity problem. Now, we think of the classic red-green colorblind, but there are several other varieties of colorblind that are not as common, but still it's possible. So when you're designing your screen, when you're designing your system, when you're picking your standards, be very aware of a colorblind issue. Be very aware of making sure that everybody can see it. You probably have a colorblind person on your team. Don't single them out. Don't make them feel weird about it. But they're pretty common. They're pretty normal. So ask them for help, or find some people that will help you with this, or look up some color charts that will help you with this. So aesthetics are important. Just as a side note, when I look at my wife and say at Lowe's, I don't see the difference between those two paint chips. It's not because I'm inept. It's because I have a little color acuity issues. It's not me being difficult. So, you know, so again, take that into account as you're working on the aesthetics of your system, as you're working on making your system as pleasing as possible. The next thing we need to really think about when we're doing a UI design is the usage level. Because if we have a daily expert that uses this screen, that uses this system every day, versus a casual or novice user who uses the system occasionally or who is new to using this system, an expert, the screen can be more crowded because they know what they're doing. An expert can really wants ease of use. They want to be able to zoom through it and get the data in and get it in and get it in and get their information in. They want shortcuts. They want features. And from what I've seen over the years, they would really, some of the experts, some of the daily users, would like a screen to be mouseless, because they would like to be able to type in, enter, 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 and never have their fingers leave the keyboard. Not type in, tab, because the tab is on the left side of the screen and is a smaller button than the enter key on the right hand side. So Fitz's law says that type, enter, type, enter, type, enter is much faster than typing, go to the mouse, click on the next field, typing, go to the mouse, click on the next field. See all of the Fitz's law things that are different between an expert and a casual user. You know, a casual user or a novice user needs the screens to be more simple, needs ease of learning. They need menus and their shortcuts would be different than the expert would use shortcuts. Does that mean that you need to create two versions of every screen? No, but you need to keep in mind who a vast majority of your users are. Because if it's a screen written for the experts, the novices, the new employees, the new persons assigned to use that screen will learn it. It's just going to take them a while, because that screen is just designed for the experts. Where a screen that's not designed for the experts is going to infuriate the experts, because it's like, this is slower, this is horrible, it takes me forever. So we've got to play that usage level very thoughtfully on every screen as we go through in every part of our user interface design. And then there's consistency. And you can see that I put up there in the yellow, it's, in my humble opinion, the most important one of these things to think about. Consistency allows the user to predict what's going to happen. So we want all of our screens and all of our parts of a system to look and feel the same way. We want them to react the same way. We want them to react to the enter key or the tab key the same way. We want buttons in the same place, with the same shape, with the same colors, with the same words, with the same alt key shortcuts. We want menu access to be the same and consistent. We want fields to act the same. For instance, if it's a date field, we want the user to enter the date the same way everywhere in the system. Now, you might want to force the user to 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day using the ISO format. You might give the user a box, a button that would display a calendar and let them pick a date from a date chooser. You might not. You might allow dates to be entered in a local format of month, day, year, or day, month, year, based upon the country you're in. I don't know. That's the decision you make as the designer. That's the decision that you make as a team when you're creating this interface with your stakeholders, of course. But all of the fields in the system need to act the same. Regardless of which programmer did it, they all need to act the same. Same with currencies. Same with time. Same with looking something up. You don't want a field where you don't want a system where in some fields you type in a name and it drops down, but in other parts they've got to hit a button to look things up and get a separate lookup screen, or whatever you choose, whatever you decide, make it consistent, because you're going to make your users smarter, faster, better, and the software will be a whole lot less buggy if you do this. Be sure that your iconography, your images, your buttons, your text, your colors, again, your aesthetics, all also need to be consistent. So consistency, really, really important when it comes to designing your user interface. There are lots of systems that we probably use on a regular basis, I won't mention them by name, that aren't very consistent. You'll go into one tab on a site and it works this way, but you'll go onto another tab and it's laid out differently, and things don't make as much sense and aren't in the same sort of order, and the buttons look a little different. Well, see, they weren't paying attention, were they? They weren't really thinking about making it usable. They weren't worried about usability. They were just get her done. And it's common, but it really should be avoided. You should be consistent to the very end and fight for consistency. And then the last thing that we need to really focus on in usability is, how do we minimize user effort? We want the computer system to do as much for the user as possible. We want the user to enjoy using the system. And one of the ways that we get enjoyment from the system is to make it efficient. So, I truly believe that beautiful is efficient and efficient is beautiful. Stop and look at a flower, look at a tree. They're beautiful things, they're beautiful structures, and they're amazingly efficient at what they do as devices, as creations. They're just gorgeous in their simplicity and their complexity and their beauty and their efficiency. And again, I want you to think that way when you're thinking about how to minimize user effort. Keep your menus easy to understand. Don't go 25 levels deep into a menu, because users will get lost and not know where things are, and it'll take them forever to find it. So try to keep your menus easy to understand. Remember the time it takes your hands to leave the keyboard. Go find your mouse, move your mouse around until you can find your mouse pointer, move it to the target where you want it, click it, and then move your fingers back to the keyboard and put your fingers back on the home row. Hopefully you know how to type. Takes a lot of time. And think of all of the Fitts law targets that you've done, because you've had to target the mouse, then you had to target the mouse pointer, then you had to target where you're going to point, then you had to target the pointer button, then you had to move your hand back over somewhere else. I mean, think of all of those different things, activities you've got to do. So mouse clicks take time. Try to minimize those. Passing through fields you don't need on a regular basis take time. It's just very slow to do that, and we want to try to minimize the user's effort, minimize the user's eye strain, minimize all of those things to keep the system efficient and to keep everything beautiful. This concludes video 9A in our Systems Analysis and Design course. This presentation is copyright 2020 by James M. Renault, PhD. All rights are reserved. I would like to say thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again in a future video.